Tonight is also to be a journey of learning. As each time we meet, we learn more about God's Word, and we continue then to become. And so our goal is becoming all that God has called us to be. Now, if you're here for the very first time, our inspiration comes from Psalm 1, where the blessed man is described like a tree that is planted by the streams of water. And those streams represent the Word of God. And so your life streams by the streams, life streams. And so that's where the idea comes from. And so let's keep going. We've done a lot of preliminary, introductory stuff. We're just going to jump right into the material for tonight. And I promised you that each night we're going to track, right? UPS style. We're going to track exactly where we're going so that we can see that there is rhyme and reason. And so 3 weeks ago, we launched this new program, Live Streams, by talking about the inspiration behind it coming from Psalm 1. Then the second night, or the second meeting, we talked about the two-point strategy that we were going to employ, and I'm not going to review all that. Hey, it's on our website, livestreamsonline.net. You can go, the audio, the video, and all kinds of good stuff is on there for your edification. And then last week, we started a little mini-series on communication. Experts say that communication is the key to building a relationship, not just marriage, but any relationship. Parent-child, best friends, whatever it might be. And so this is going to be about 3-4 weeks together. Last week, we just got it started by talking about timing. And if you are part of our network through Facebook, live streams, you know what tonight's topic is. It's a subtopic under communication. You guys know? It's gender differences. Okay? Remember, I've been hinting for a while sometime that there are differences between men and women. You know that, right? There are differences for sure. I hear some snickering out there. And understandably so. Two different species, right? Coming from two totally different worlds. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to laugh together, but we're also going to explore God's Word and see the answers that are there. So let's say right off the bat that differences are good, okay? We don't want to say they're bad. Differences are good, and God created these differences. But if these differences are not understood, not recognized, and you don't make adjustments, and not only that, if you expect the other to act or think just like you, or in this case, talk just like you, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So they can be good differences, that's how God created them, but it can really discourage you too if you're living with somebody for a very long time, and after a while those differences start really wearing on you, you know what I mean? And start breaking the relationship. And again, not just marriage. Live Streams is about everyone in every life chapter finding relevance in whatever topic that we are talking about. So really, friendships, church relationships, whatever relationship that you are in. And so our goal here tonight is to acquire knowledge of these differences, and then we're going to outline some practical solutions on how to do that. And tonight is part one. Now, before we get started, I want you to know that I'm just going to be talking in generalities, okay? So there might be times tonight you'll say, hey, that's not me. I'm not like that. And my response will be, yeah, okay. That's always going to be the case. There's going to be somebody who's not going to be able to relate to it. These are generalities, and we're talking in generalities because they're generally true, okay? Not only that, but it could be reversed, okay? Meaning that in your life, for example, the guy might have a style that women might be known for, or the girl might have styles that guys might generally have. And hey, nothing wrong with that, okay? That's just style, personalities, whatever. And so no big deal if those things are reversed, okay? Not going to make some strong statements about how guys have to be this way and how ladies have to be that way. That's not what tonight is about, all right? We're just going to talk in generalities, and if it's reversed, that's totally fine. So we're going to start out by trying to understand the general differences. And we're going to start by saying that the purpose of communication is different. Do you know that? Men and women generally talk for a different purpose. For example, women generally, in generality, use communication to develop relationships. Okay, that's why they talk. All right, that's why they don't go play ball if they meet their best friend. Right? What do? They go to Denny's, right, and they talk all night long. And so talking is used to develop relationships. Now, I know you ladies out there saying, well, what other reason is there to talk? Right? There's actually another reason to talk, and that is men use communication to accomplish a task. Okay, so that's a little bit different. So let's warm up to this difference right now. Women use it for what? Building relationships, right? And men use it to accomplish a task. These are generalities, and so that's why a lot of times when men feel like they don't need to accomplish something, they just kind of shut down, you know, and then they don't talk. And so those are some of the things that are going on right now. And so really, any relationship, let me say that again, so we're still warming up here, marriage, whatever, church relationships, friendships, these are just some of the generalities there. And I'm going to say again, if you don't recognize that this stuff is going on, it can easily break it because you end up with either consciously or subconsciously expecting the other side to think and talk just like you, and that's when trouble comes in. So tonight, we're going to talk about some of the differences, just a little bit, because I'm looking at the clock, and you know the little ones who are over there, they got to go home and go to bed, right? And so we're keeping an eye on the clock, and so tonight is part one. Next week, I'll give you some more stuff, all right? And so take a look on the screen. You're going to see that we're going to talk about gender differences. She's a woman. He's a guy, all right? And there are some general differences. In fact, if you're not aware of them, relax and just have false expectations, whatever. There's some dangers involved. So that's our plan right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about the woman, the man, and talk about some dangers that can happen if you are not too careful. You guys with me? You guys know what we're going to do here? All right, let's get started. So here's the first category. I'm going to give you 4 categories. Tonight, we'll talk about 2. Next week, we'll talk about 2. And so the category for tonight is words and motives. Okay? Words and motives. That's the Jeopardy category here. So for the woman, she has a high emphasis on what? Task or relationships. Relationships, right? And so that's going to lead to a very high emphasis or sensitivity on words and motives, because everything, generally speaking, everything, okay, has some deep meaning to it. Every action, every motive, everything that's said, she's absolutely convinced that there is some reason behind it. That's why the smallest little thing just means so much to her. I mean, she's just so touched by the little things that he does, right? I mean, she will say things that a guy will never say. How sweet, okay? She will say that for all the little things that he does, right? I mean, the way he takes out the trash, he's just so sensitive. He knows I don't like to do it. He knows I don't like it. And how much he cares for me, and he never complains or asks me to do it. He is just so sweet. And the guy's like, what? What are you talking about? I just happened to, it's Thursday night, I'm just taking out the trash. Okay, he doesn't know what's going on, all right? And so she's thinking he's so sensitive, and he's like, okay, I guess. And so he's a little bit confused. Now, there's a danger to this, and we're not just trying to poke fun tonight, but this is based on real stuff of 20 years of counseling as couples come in and they begin to voice their frustrations about each other. And so here's some dangers that are involved with this. She is susceptible to, I'll give you 2 words, you tell me which one, over or under. She is susceptible to overinterpretation or underinterpretation. Over, because you see, if she's so hypersensitive to everything and everything has meaning, she's susceptible to overinterpretation, that everything has deep meaning, every action and so forth. And so she could get mad very easily and say, so, you don't like my mother. He's like, how'd you get that? Well, we were just talking about my mother, and then you said, time to take out the trash. All right? So you think my mom is trash. You see? Over-interpretation. And so in counseling, what happens a lot of the times is the guy will often say, honey, I know you think that, but don't think that because there's really nothing behind it. And he's right. Okay? Guys are usually what? Not that deep, right? And so they're on the other side. Not over-interpretation, they're what? Under-interpretation. That's their danger, but they're down here, flying under the radar, right? And so a lot of times you'll get that in counseling. Husbands will say, you know what? I didn't mean it that way. Have you ever said that to your wife? That's not how I meant it. And ladies, it's true. There's not much there, okay? They didn't mean it that way at all. All right, that's the first category. We'll talk more about that later. Next category is number of topics. This is a huge difference. Again, it could be reversed. No big deal, all right? But generally speaking, women have a high emphasis on what? Tasks or relationships. Relationships. And in life, there are so many relationships, right? Spousal relationship, parent-child. There's relationships in school. There's a Pilates class. There's so many relationships that she is a part of. And so her life or her world is very complicated, right? It's like a very complicated freeway with so many sig alerts and exits and multiple lanes and detours and other cars and her cars and kids in the back seat and putting on the makeup at the same time. I mean, it's just all happening all at the same time, right? Places to go, people to meet, deadlines and so forth. So she's like some complicated LA freeway. The guy? Oh, he's nothing like that. He's just a simple country road, all right? So he's John Denver, right? Country road. Take me home. So he's just one tree and three cows over there. That's all he is on that side. And so we got a situation that's very different where she's very complicated and he wants to keep things simple and not to disrespect him. Here's a word, sequential, organized. He's mechanical. He wants to talk about one thing at a time. Does that sound familiar? And so you got two different ways of speaking right here, and the danger involved with this is that you can grow very impatient with one another, okay? For example, and this is a true story. Yeah, it didn't happen here, but it was actually in Northern California. I was counseling this one couple, no lie. They sat down, and the guy says, Pastor, I think something is medically wrong with my wife. And I said, what? What's wrong? Every time I ask her a question, she never answers the question. She always talks about something else. For example, and this was the example that he gave. He said, I asked her how her sister was doing because she was sick. And she said, oh, yes, she's so sick because she's like every woman in the world, juggling family and career, and then she comes home and she feels guilty because she's not spending enough time with the family, and so she's thinking about going on vacation, and so she and I talked about this fantastic package to go to Hawaii, and honey, you and I, we need to do that too. We need to go out on a vacation too, and we'll talk about that tonight. But remember, you got to take Johnny to soccer tonight, and don't forget tonight is your turn to take the juice and cookies, okay? And on your way back home, bring some milk. And by the way, those pants look really good on you tonight. We need to go to Nordstrom Rack again. And he's like, what? I just asked you how your sister was doing. What's going on? And so he thinks, and it's like, I mean, we're laughing, but he's really serious. And you know what happened in that true story? She's got her head down because you know what? She thinks she's crazy too. She believes it. Why? Because he said it so many times. Why can't you get to the point? Why can't you get to the point? I asked you a simple question, and so what is his criticism? Why do you fly off tangents? Why can't you focus on anything that I say? You see how this thing works? One person lives a very complicated life, and the guy's always saying, what's that favorite line that guys always say? What's the point? Okay? Or, get to the point. Okay, what are you trying to say? Get to the point. All right? And a woman's response, she might not say it out loud, is, I don't want to get to the point. All right? Where's the fun in that? I don't want to get to the point because I'm interested in all the points. All right? Not just the bottom line. Now, we'll talk about this more next week, but the idea is if she doesn't get to say all that's on her mind, she feels ripped off. Well, what's so special about the main point? All the points are important. And so what she's really saying is, and guys, you need to understand this, is my life is filled with so many points. My life has so many things going on. So many relationships, so many issues, so much drama with the children, and all of those things are important to me, and I want to talk about all of them. And so she has the mindset of a master conductor, where her life is filled with all these things, and so she symphonically conducts all of that together, and that's how she talks, right? But the guy, he's not a master conductor. He doesn't think symphonic. He's a laser surgeon, right? He wants to talk about one thing at a time, all right? And so he wants to get to the point and talk about one topic, and he'll talk about that ad nauseum till, the cows come home to his country road. He's going to talk about that all night long. And so he wants to focus, fix it. Remember, he's a problem solver, and then he wants to move on. And so she'll always accuse him of, why do you got such a one-track mind? Why are you so fixated on that one topic? Let me tell you something, all right? More than once, the first time I heard this, I thought it was crazy. But I started hearing it over and over again, and it's this. Pastor, okay, this really happened. I think my husband is autistic, all right? Now, when I first heard it, I'm like, that's just so ridiculous. But I hear it so much. And what they're really trying to say, and by the way, autism is nothing to laugh at, right? It's very serious, and we're going to Skype in, video conference in, some specialist way in the future for a few minutes and talk about that. But my point is that women really think there's something medically wrong with their husbands because they get fixated on one thing and they can't let it go. So I was having coffee with this one couple, right? And this guy had lost like 30 pounds, okay? And me, I'm interested in weight loss. And so I asked him, so what you doing? And he said, South Beach diet. He goes, you want to hear about it? And so for the next 2 hours, he's talking about the South Beach diet, right? And his wife taps me on the shoulder and says, I think he's autistic, okay? He can't let it go. You see what I mean? And so these are the differences where a woman is like a freeway. She's going to go in and out of every lane, and she's going to do everything all at once because she's the master conductor. And he's like, get to the point. What are you trying to say? And so those are just some of the differences that make it very difficult to communicate. We'll add to that next week. Looking at the clock, we want to make tonight a digestible portion for you to take home. So next week, we're going to add to it and give some more insights into just how different men and women are. But tonight, we're just warming up to this idea that, wow, they're really different. They really come from totally different places. One side uses communication to develop relationships. The other side uses communication to accomplish a task. And again, if it's reversed, not a big deal, okay? It's really, I'm not saying one style is just guys, the other one is just gals. That's not the point. The point is that when there are differences, and by the way, you marry somebody who was different from you, okay? We'll talk about that in a minute. When those differences are there, it's very important that you recognize those differences and then make, and here's a biblical concept, adjustments so that you can bless each other with your words. That's a concept that we talked about last week, okay? And so it's about recognition, it's about understanding, it's about learning. That's what live streams is about, and then doing the necessary things to become what God wants you to be. So as you do that, hopefully, Lord willing, you will establish proper habits of communication that will last a lifetime, way into the latter years, because way too much of broken relationships in the latter years of life. It's like you stay together only for the kids, and then as soon as empty nesting comes, wow, they're like, well, why do we need to be together anymore? We'll talk about that kind of stuff later. But I'm saying communication is the key to developing healthy relationships. But the opposite is just as true, and that is communication is the way to destroy a relationship. All right? And so with that, tonight, we're going to warm up to some solutions. Let's get cracking right here with some solutions and say that live streams tonight is about learning. That's one of our subtitles, is that we're going to focus on the things that we can learn from God's Word. And the first principle is learn to communicate. It's an ongoing process of learning. And that's why all of our subtitles have the ing, so that we can focus on the ongoing process of learning. So let me say the obvious. Communication is not a natural talent that you're born with. You don't become born, so to speak, and then suddenly become great. Some people have the gift of gab, you know what I mean? But most of us don't. It's a skill that we have to learn. And so remember last week, we talked about wisdom, framing the mind, and how that comes out in our life skills. And in this case, we're talking about the things that we learn, and then it comes out in the way that we speak. So we have to learn how to speak and not naively expect the other person to talk just like us, because that's just not the case. So whether you're in a marriage, whether you're dating, whether you are, best friend, whatever situation, hey, it takes work, doesn't it, to develop good communication and good relationships, right? And so you need to do that and not naively expect the other person to be just like you. And so let me say that again that I said 5 minutes ago. You married somebody who's different from you. Now, maybe that wasn't your initial plan, but it just kind of worked out. Have you noticed that? 99% of couples you know, aren't they opposites of one another? Pretty much. Opposites do attract. Very rarely, from all my experience in counseling, very rarely are couples exactly alike. Usually they're opposites of one another. And so there's that saying, opposites attract. That's usually true. So for example, we'll talk about this later. Have you noticed, and for example, just one example, that maybe the woman, she's just very excited, okay? So she's just a cheerleader, very excited, exuberant, just talking a mile a minute, has so much to say. And I'm not saying all women are like that. It's just an example, all right? So she's like that, and then you can bet her husband's a dead fish. You know what I mean? He's got nothing to say, right? So you got situations like that all the time. And so in counseling, you got situations where one person's talking, and the other person has absolutely nothing to say. My point is, hey, it's not breaking news that we have different communication style, right? One person's bouncing off the wall, and the other person has absolutely nothing to say. And we need to get her off the screen. Wipe the screen, and we need to say that there are two subcategories under learning. Let me make some general comments under general learning. All of us, and this is where live streams can help you, but you can do this yourself because we're actually living in a very good time right now, this generation, where today there's been a lot of good study on male and female differences. That wasn't the case 25 years ago. Back then, they didn't even recognize it. There are scholars even today that don't even recognize gender differences. And so I think we're living a very good time right now where good research is coming out and we can benefit from them. But let's also say that the Word of God has plenty of information and guidelines for us in developing healthy relationships. And Lord willing, you come out every Wednesday night, and live streams will help you in communication, conflict resolution, many other areas that we're going to delve into in the very near future. And so, for example, gender differences. We talked about that tonight just a little bit. We'll talk more next week. But my point is, even based on what little I told you tonight, do you think you can go home and make some adjustments? You can, right? For example, ladies, let me speak to you for just a minute. Guys, you know that guys like to talk about one thing at a time, right? And so now as you approach guys, you can make that adjustment, and with your husband, not talk about everything. You say that for your girlfriend. Talk about one thing, and then you ask him how he would solve that problem, because you know guys are wired to be problem solvers, right? And so that's an adjustment that you can make. That's an example. Now, to the men. Men, now you know that women, they're not going to change and suddenly get to the point, all right? They want to talk about everything, and you need to be patient and understand, just a little tip for you, understand that they just see the world as one big interconnection. And all those things are important. And you need to be patient. And you need to let her talk. And so the tip for you tonight is let her talk, okay? And stop saying get to the point. Because that's not going to help your marriage at all, okay? So just let her talk, and I know what you're thinking. Pastor, she's never going to stop, all right? No, she'll stop at some point, all right? I think. All right. So that's general. We're almost done here. Let's talk about specifics. There's specific learning as well. And the reason for this is that we married specific people. We have best friends who are specific people. I'm saying something obvious here. You didn't marry a billion people. And a billion people, and I know some of you professional Facebook users will disagree, you don't have a billion friends, all right? You have a few close friends. And my point is, those specific friends have specific personalities and specific styles. And so therefore, general information is not going to cut it. It's going to give you just general guidelines. It's just not enough. You're living with or hanging out with people who are specific. And so they're going to have their own idiosyncrasies, styles about them. And so let's talk a little more specific, give you a little more insight. And I'm going to talk to both species tonight. Let's start with the ladies. Ladies first, right? And so let me give you some specific learning on men here. What if you live with one of these, all right? He may not talk very much. He doesn't have much to say. And now you know one of the reasons is he feels like, well, I don't have anything to say, all right? Because there's nothing to fix, okay? There's no problem to solve. And so he might shut it down and not have anything to say. But there's another reason, ladies, why guys shut down. There's another reason that's very important, and this will give you insight into why your son doesn't talk to you. Moms, have you ever said to your son, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know such and such and such. And the kid's like, I don't know. It never occurred to him. Whereas your daughter will tell you everything, right? And so why is it like that? Why doesn't guys share their feelings? Okay, here's one of the reasons. Is that all our lives, and I'm not just talking about this country, but really all around the world, there's a certain image of how a guy should be. He's supposed to be strong. He's not supposed to cave in to his feelings. And so when he gets hurt or something bothers, he's got to suck it up. He can't let his feelings show, and we raise boys to be that way. So think about this. If a little boy cries, right? You say, oh, come on now. Don't cry. Big boys don't cry. And what if he stops crying? That's a big boy, and you reward him for not crying. Don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Wipe your tears. Big boys don't cry. I know it hurts, but hold it in, okay? Hold it in. Don't let it out, okay? That's what big boys do. So hold it in, okay? Hold it in. Don't let it out, all right? Big boys can handle it. Oh, you're such a big boy. You're not crying. Whereas we let little girls cry, right? Oh, you're such a big boy for not crying. So that's why when you grow up, you're holding it in. You're holding it in. Because all your life, you've been rewarded for holding it in and not just crying in front of everybody. Imagine a little boy crying in third grade, how much their friends would make fun of him, cry baby and so forth. The pressures that are on boys and men to be so strong and not let the feelings out. Here's a true story. So this guy, right? True story. I'm going to leave out all the details because this happens all the time. The engagement was broken. He was devastated. All his friends were devastated. Canceled all the parties, events, whatever, okay? And you know what he did? He shut himself, true story, in his bedroom for a month. All his friends emailing him, calling him, texting him. He shut it all down for a month. Why? Because he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to go to a coffee shop and cry about it. And so he sat in his room, laid on his bed for a whole month, and then afterwards, true story, he comes out and he says, I'm good, ready to go. Let's go. All right, I'm ready. And so he went on. In other words, he moved on with his life. We'll talk more about that next week. Why guys always say, hey, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just move on. That's how guys are. And so there's a lot of socialization that is involved in it. I guess what I'm trying to say tonight is, what if you live with somebody like that? We're talking about communication tonight, and the guy doesn't want to talk. Now, we can reverse it and say, what if you're living with a woman that doesn't want to talk? What do you do? Okay? I'm going to say that you have to go where the fish are. Okay? Talk about that fish. You got to go where the fish are, and that's deep down into the dark waters. Not my idea. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5 says, the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. What it's saying is that all of us, as we grow older, we become very complicated. And the more complicated we get, the analogy is it's like deep, dark waters. Have you ever looked down into deep, dark waters? The point is you can't see. It's dark, it's murky, it's cold, it's mysterious. And so the whole idea is if you're looking down into deep, dark, dirty water, you can't see anything. And if you can't see anything, you don't understand. And so the whole idea is you got to go down. You got to put on your scuba gear and you got to go way down, because that's where he's at. Because a man's heart, okay, if he's like one of those fish, he's way down there. You got to put on your gear and you got to go down, because he ain't coming to the surface. That's the point. So you got to go way down. And he's somewhere down there. Where could he be? I mean, he's been hiding all his feelings all his life. Where could he be? Can't find him. But you got to look. You got to look. Keep swimming. I think I see him. There he is. Right there. Okay? Deep down there. And when you find him there, you engage him where he is at. People always come to me and say, oh, Pastor, you wouldn't understand or whatever, and say all this stuff. And I said, that's okay. That's where you're at. We'll start there. And when you start there, you have to develop the skill of drawing it out. Now, if any one of you are reporters, journalists, people who had to write things, you know that when you interview people, those people ain't giving up information. You have to have the skill of interviewing and draw it out. And so what this verse is saying is that you, with understanding, that's what we talked about last week, you know that this person is not going to give it up, is not going to give you that information. And so what do you got to do? You got to be like that professional interviewer who has honed in her skills of drawing out the information. And so suddenly this guy who didn't want to talk wants to now talk. Most people are not in the mood to talk, but the other person has to draw it out. You got to do that, moms, to your boys, because they're not going to give it up. You have to draw it out of them, because they're not daughters, they're sons. They're different. And husbands used to be sons. And so they carry that same style into the marriage. And so, you know, this is a really big topic. We'll talk more about this next week and ongoing. By the way, communication, this mini-series, is very much connected to another series that we'll do called conflict resolution. Because if communication breaks a relationship, conflict resolution fixes that relationship. And so we'll have another mini-series on that. But that's all stuff for the women if they're living with a dead fish. Let's talk a little bit about men. All right? Men. All right. Men have an attitude, let me talk to the guys tonight, that I think is a little bit unhealthy. The attitude is women. You hear this all the time. You can't understand women. All right? How do you expect to understand all women? They are a mystery. They're just an unsolved mystery. We can't figure them out, okay? And so I get this response all the time. Do you really expect me to sit down with them, squeeze lemons with them, okay? Chit-chat and giggle with them? I can't do that. And my response is, okay, well, if you can, that's fine. But most men will hurt themselves if they sit in that kind of situation. So you don't have to do that. That's not my point. Here it is. Remember, you don't have to know all the women in the world. And so let me say it that way. You don't have to understand all females. Just understand the ones that are in your life. So that brings the statistic down from about 5 billion to about 3, right? Okay? So a little bit more realistic. You don't have to understand all women. And so this attitude of, I can't understand women. Hey, you don't have to understand all women. That's not what God's asking you to do. You just have to understand the specific women or daughters in your life. So statistically, that's a little bit more doable. Now, this principle comes from the scriptures, but it's the idea of observation. It's like a biologist who is observing that large, giant tortoise, right? He's not looking at all the tortoise in the world. He's looking at this one tortoise, okay? And he's gaining knowledge by taking his time. Hey, not my idea. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7 says, husbands, be considerate as you live with your wives. Now, in the original Greek, that phrase is literally dwelling together according to knowledge. Meaning, hey, you live with someone, you need to know specific information about that person, details about that person's life. You cannot, okay? All right, you get a write-off if you say you don't understand all women. That's fine. But the woman that's in your life, you can't say she's an unsolved mystery, okay? You have to know her. You can't say, I can't figure her out, because it's your job. And if it's a job, guys get it. Okay, that's my job. I'm going to do research, and I'm going to do what I can to take care of business. And guys need to think that way, okay? And so she is not an unsolved mystery, but she is a big, round, I got to be careful here, giant tortoise. And you have to get to know her and understand her. In this book, The Complete Husband, which I recommend, Lou Priolo, his name's cut off at the bottom of the screen, Lou Priolo, you can get that book anywhere. He said this statement, and I find it very profound. He said, revelation is a prerequisite to a relationship. Another way to say it is information, you need it. You need specific information in order to have a relationship. I'm not talking about cocktail parties where you chit-chat and after 2 hours you know nothing about the person. But I'm talking about specific information. He calls it revelation. That sounds very cool. But the idea is you need information if you want to have a genuine relationship. And hey, that reminds me of 1 Peter 3:7, where it says, as you live. And in the original Greek, it's an ongoing. The form of the word is ongoing, ing. And so it's about living. And as you live life, you get to know her and you understand her. So guys, you can't have that lazy attitude, say, I know everything about her, all right? No big deal. I know her inside out. Hey, I've been with her for 30 years. I know her really well. Hey, watch out, because she's changing. Okay? She's changing her mind. And it's not because she's unstable, but because she's changing. You may not realize you're changing and that she's changing and your kids are changing, but people are changing. Why? Because God has designed for our lives to have actually divisions, or I call it life chapter, or as Livestreams calls it, seasons of life, represented in the Livestreams tree with the changing colors. And so your life, like changing colors, changes. And so this woman goes through changes from being married to the guy, to having a child, to becoming an in-law, to empty nesting, and when you kick the bucket, she becomes a widow. And so all of these changes happen in her life. And as those changes happen, you know what happens also? The mind begins to change. Priorities, different values, different philosophies. You begin to age and to mature. And that's not bad. I'm just saying it's different, as different chapters are meant to be. And so the learning never stops. You continue to learn. You continue to make adjustments in your conversation. And we're going to learn more about that next week. Today is just scratching the surface. We're almost done here. Just scratching the surface about what we need to do. Oh, I know why. We started 5 minutes late. That's why we're 5 minutes behind schedule. Okay? I don't feel as bad now. So here's what's going on. Let me close this whole thing. And that is, you learn specific things. You learn general things, stuff we're going to learn next week, and it will give you ideas about how you can make adjustments. And really, not just speaking to the young people tonight, but I'm speaking to those who have been in relationships for a very long time. Let me end with a true story. I was at a men's retreat up in Santa Cruz, and I was the youngest guy there. Everybody was so much older than I, and we had a chance to talk about manliness. And I did give an example about how guys tend to rip off women emotionally by just shutting them down and saying, just get to the point. I don't want to hear all that. Just get to the point. What are you trying to say? And we had a talk like that. And after this talk, we went out and played softball. And I actually have photos from that softball game. These are actual photos. And I used to tell this story without it, but I did not know that one of the attenders was a professional photographer, and he was hiding behind the bushes, and he caught this entire sequence. And so this guy right there, he's talking on his cell phone right out in left field. And if you know anything about baseball or softball, that's a busy place, all right? You don't, you're not supposed to be distracted in left field, but there he is, talking on his cell phone in the middle of a softball game, all right? And so he's talking on the phone, and he's an elderly gentleman, and this is not a good situation because chances are a ball's going to come to him, okay? And so sure enough, there's a pop fly, and it comes to him, and everybody's like, it's coming, all right? Hey, hey, hey. And he didn't know. And it hits him right on the head, okay, and knocks him down. I cannot believe I actually have the photos for that. You see the ball on the right side? So he falls down, and by the way, there's me right there, okay? I'm right there sitting, watching this whole sequence. So he falls on the ground, and everybody is so worried because he got injured, right? And so they rush up to him and said, are you okay? Hey, you should be paying attention. Shouldn't be talking on your phone in the middle of left field like that. And so he gets up and starts talking on the phone again. And he continues to talk on the phone. It's a true story. And so after the game, myself and a bunch of us went up to him, and we're just like literally rolling around on the ground laughing because it's so funny. You know, it's like, it's comical. You're on the cell phone, ball hits you, you fall down, you get back up, and you're still talking on the phone. It's so funny. What is so important that you can't put the phone down and catch the ball? And he goes, I was talking to my wife, and for 50 years, I was telling her to get to the point. I was telling her to be quiet and tell me, what is your point? And I couldn't wait till I got home to apologize to her for all the years. And all of us just stood there. What do you say? We just took him and just walked away from the field. It was just such an incredible moment to not just learn a lesson, but to learn a lesson from this distinguished gentleman who lived for so many years and had a marriage for so many years, but yet still felt he's got to make some adjustments. And for all of us tonight, whatever life chapter you are in, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in about 5 minutes, may God give you the wisdom and the strength to do the right thing and to have the manliness to go to your spouse, to apologize, and to make the adjustments. And so with that, we added another installment to our ongoing series. Tonight is part 1. You can track everything, not only at live events, Join us on Facebook's live streams with no space, and you'll find us and like us there. You can go to our website, and it's got all the previous lessons on video, audio, and stuff for the kids. A brand new batch of stuff for you and your little ones is online right now.